Dr. Jazz.
So it's I wrote to you, Ahmed, like I've been a fan of your music for such a long time,
Dr.
and
Jazz.
the stuff that you've done on your own, and with Arthur Blythe, I found I love that stuff, and Billy Bang and Sun Ra, of course. But I want to start this talk obviously with the book that's coming out, and mm, what was it's a stupid question in a way, but also not like what was the main trigger that you decided to do this? I mean, it's so much history that's musical and cultural involved in what you did. But what was the main trigger you decided to do actually the book? And
I think that I know that the inspiration for the book was I read John Zweig's biography of Sun Ra that came out just before I started writing my memoir. And I was really appalled at the way he treated one of the most important events that I experienced with Sun Ra in my life, which was going to Nigeria and playing at the Festival of Arts and Culture in 1977.
wow.
And I said, well, rather than be angry at what he did, I needed to do something on my own because nobody's going to tell the story of the experiences that you have like you can tell them, right? So, so I that's when I decided I read his book in maybe July of 1997, and by September of 1997, I was writing my own memoir.
Oh, well.
Yeah. So that was really it. And the Festival of Arts and Culture in 1977, Festac, was one of the most important events in the history of African people, therefore in the history of the world, because here was a country, Nigeria, of which Monique's father is from, by the way. Yeah. So the fact that that particular event was distorted because you would not get an impression of the grandeur of that event by reading Space as the Place. So and of historical importance, it was such a historical importance. There's never been anything like that to happen since 1977. Yeah. And it was the largest up until that point. There was one in Senegal in 1962 or so, but there's been never anything like that. Never been anything like that since 1977. And so it was important. And the interesting thing is that just about a few months ago, Marilyn Nance, who was a 23-year-old person who at Festac, did her book of photographs from that. And some of those photographs you've seen are in my memoir. Yeah. And so the timing was perfect. That it took 25 years for it to come out. It was perfect in that it came out at the same time that that this memoir is coming out. Yeah. Yeah,
that's beautiful. Yeah. No, it's so much, like it involves like your beginnings and like early 60s even, to nowadays. And it's when you guys been kind of curating the Sistas place. When I check the schedule, who's been playing there lately, like it's fantastic, it's just the groups and the music, and of course like everyone who's so important for this music is like has been playing there. And so it's like it incorporates like 60 years actually of really important events. And Monique, what was your role in this one, since we have you here? How did you help Ahmed? And I mean, first of all, how was your story? How did you guys meet? I mean, I obviously read it in the book a little bit, but if you want to share this part, it would be fun to hear.
Well, we think that institution building is really a critical piece as far as the music is concerned and as far as our culture is concerned. So the book opens, in fact, with Ahmed, me telling him about the passing of his mother. And he's on tour with the Sun Ra Orkestra in Switzerland. And the story of how I came to even be the person that told him is intriguing, because I had been in New York for a brief period of time. And for some reason, Ahmed thought it was good to introduce me to all of the people in his previous relationships. So they all had my number. We became fast friends. So it was one of those people, Mickey Davison, who called me to let me know that Ahmed's mother had passed away. In addition to that, I had taken some photographs of Ahmed's parents when I was here at Thanksgiving, and he had visited his mother and father to give them those photographs. And that was the last time that he saw them. So, you know, we always talk about what we call synchronicity in our relationship. And that's how it began. It began with this sort of needle in a haystack situation. And then since then, I think we have informed each other about, you know, the ways in which, I'm so sorry, I'm not sure whose phone that is, but we have informed each other about the ways in which I was a writer when I met him, and I am now writing a book of poetry, but he was a musician, obviously, and he is, you know, he's written a book. So I'm in the band and he's written a book, and that's that's what we've done over the course of the 31 years that we've been here, in addition to going to Sistas' place every Saturday night for the last 20 years, from September to June, September to May, religiously, and introducing the community to jazz and music of the spirit, which is a thesis that we also collaborated on in terms of our writing. So that's kind of a quick version.
Yeah. Speaking of Sistas' place, I wanted to ask you, how do you decide? You know, it's like Jimmy Owens played, like, you know, Vinard Harper, Will Calhoun, like all the greats, basically, when I checked a little. And how do you decide who, for the program, I mean, to curate it, who's playing? And
well, you know, it's something I've been doing for 25 years. We've been doing, right? Because we have a production company. We call it Melchizedek Music Productions. And the history of that is that it came out of trying to build up the Sun Ra Orkestra when Sun Ra left the planet. That's a name that I was given many years before I started using it, and I didn't understand its importance then. But Melchizedek is an angelic spirit, and we say that this music is a spiritual music. It's a music about restoring a balance to this planet, because the lives of African people have been such that it's created an imbalance with the enslavement of African people and the you know, what happened, what ensued from that. There was a music, art forms were given to us to ensure that the rest of humanity would understand our humanity, I believe. You know, I believe in the omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent reality that is in everything, everywhere, everybody, everywhere you go, you see. And so that reality means that there has to be a balance. Yeah, you can't have one people, you know, thinking that they're supreme over other people, because it's not true, you know, and that myth has to be shattered. One of the things about Sun Ra was that, and why his orchestra has lived 30 years past his presence on the planet, is that he was very scientific in building that orchestra. You see, he came from Birmingham, Alabama, where African people were not even in books. You know, they had to walk across the street when white folks came, you know. So he really understood all of that. And when he came to Chicago, he had a place to do extreme research And that's where he really came to understand who he was, that he was not Herman Sonny Blunt, but he was Sun Ra. Yeah, he was somebody who was gifted with a message and an understanding, and he put that into this band. The first band he called the Myth Science Orchestra, or the Space Trio. Then it went into the morphed into the Myth Science Orchestra. But he understood something about America, that America was built on lies, lies about African people. Yeah, basically. And to counteract that lie, you had to create a balanced situation. So he created a lie about his own existence. He said, hey, I came from Saturn, you know. You know, I have an expansive understanding of who I am. I'm omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient. You understand what I'm saying? You know,
Yeah.
So, you know, these are the things that that we, in learning from this master, and in understanding the message that was given to me early on, before we met each other, even before Monique and I met each other, I was given this message that at the right time, I would know when to use that name. And the use of it, we started using it when we decided that we were going to make this Sun Ra Orkestra come back to life without Sun Ra. And we did that for a few years we did it with Marshall Allen. And then it was time for us to move on. Yeah. And so as I was writing the book, A Strange Celestial Road, I was offered the opportunity to do that at Sistas' place.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? And I've been doing that, you know, interestingly enough, just I've been doing it for 25 years. And just last 2 weeks ago, we decided it was time to move on, right? Our job at Sistas' place had been done.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
25 years, yes. So after 25 years, May 27, 2023, we decided that we were going to move on to do something else. I'm going to do a book reading at Sistas' place on July 23rd. Yeah. And that will be, you know, that will close out that particular chapter. But the chapter began with writing the book, and it's going to end when the book is coming out, like that. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. Wow. Monique, were you aware of Sun Ra Orkestra when you met Ahmed?
Well, yes. So it was my first occasion seeing the Sun Ra Orchestra. I used to go to Ronnie Scott's religiously. I actually used to go to Ronnie Scott's, and then for people who know it, I would go. My girlfriend and I, we would go up to they had a disco above the club, so we would go and hear a jazz set, and then we would go upstairs and dance, and then come back down. And it was on the stairs coming from the disco upstairs, we met Ahmed and Tyrone. For people who we met them on the stairs. And
Tyrone Hill, by the way.
Tyrone Hill, yeah, a trombonist. And we met them on the stairs, and my girlfriend said to me that the day after, oh, you walked off with the most handsome person on the stage. I said, walked off with? No, I didn't. But in that time, we found out in talking, we had a drink together, and I found out that Ahmed was born on the same day as my father, which is May 10th. And we exchanged information, and I ended up writing an article on him, which was called Who's the Real Ambassadors, for a Black arts magazine called Outrage. And that was the beginning of our transatlantic courtship. It has to be said that within 6 months we were married, and I was in New York. And I was a feminist at the time, so I was not really intending to be married, let alone moving to New York. But that's what happened. And 30 years later, here we are to tell the tale. Yeah. So it was my first visit to Ronnie Scott's as it happened.
Wow,
but we've been back on various anniversaries since. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sure. Wow, that's beautiful. Ahmed, I wanted to ask you, in the book I've read, I mean, if you can share with, the viewers and listeners, how was your first meeting with Sun Ra? And I love that part, actually, when the first rehearsal. It's so beautifully written, but how did this thing happen? that, you know, how did he get to know you? I mean, about you and going to that first rehearsal, if you can share that, please.
He got to know about me because I was working with a band that of which 50% of the members of the band were former members of the Sun Ra Orkestra. And if you know anything about the Sun Ra Orkestra, you would know that it's a family. Sun Ra would always support the people who were part of his family. He was very particular about people who were part of his institution, his family, the Sun Ra Orkestra, right? So Ronnie Boykins and Roger Blank were half of a band that was called the Melodic Quartet. And in 1974, we played at a park in not too far from the house where Sun Ra lived. He was living in Philadelphia by 1974. And the entire band of the people who were living in Philadelphia came out to hear us, you know, in support of Ronnie and Roger. And they heard me, and they got my number. And a year later, actually, Sun Ra called me and asked me to come to a rehearsal. He didn't say that he was going to have me in his band or anything. He just said that I needed to come to a rehearsal, come down to Philadelphia to rehearse with the band. Of course, I was very excited because I knew Sun Ra was like, you know, a major player by 1975 in Brooklyn, where we're living now. And I was living in Brooklyn at the time as well. So I had, even though my woman at the time was pregnant and with what would have been twins, and by the way, their arrival date was just 2 days ago, June 6th. They came on the planet June 6, 1975, Rashid and Shahid, our sons. I went down to rehearse with him. I didn't know anything about a gig or anything. You know, he sent me the money to go down to the rehearsal, and I rehearsed with him. And the next thing I knew, I was playing at a place called the East, which was one of the great places. In fact, Sistas' place is a block away from the East, 2 blocks away, actually, right? East was on Claver Place and right around Jefferson, and Sistas' place is on Jefferson and Nostrand, 2 blocks away, really. And so I played my first performance with Sun Ra at the East. And yes, it is described in the book because it was an amazing affair. That was the first time that I played with him, and it was, you know, a very Afrocentric, Pan-African place. Yeah. That's also the part of Sun Ra's life that is not really included in any material that I've read about him. To understand, coming from Birmingham, Alabama, he was really African-centered. I mean, you know, people think about Egypt as being somewhere else on the planet besides Africa, you know, but the fact that he chose Egypt as a place, one of the oldest civilizations in the world, you know, as a place that he would then draw a name from, is significant. It's significant. You know, just like, you know, the fact that Monique comes from a Pan-African background. Her mama is Barbadian, and her father is Nigerian, you know, and, you know, there is a certain kind of pride that that has to be restored to our people in understanding who we are and where we come from. And Sun Ra was one of those people who, you know, who gave us that kind of inspiration. He would play at these places. He would go to Europe and he would play, but he would also say that we have to really support our community at the same time. You see, balance.
Yeah. You mentioned going to Europe. I wanted to ask you, like, how was it going on tour with the Sun Ra Orkestra, like, let's say, late 70s or mid 70s with that band? How was he accepted? I mean, how were you guys accepted in Europe? I mean,
well, by the time I joined the band in 1975, and the first tour I did with the band in 1976, Sun Ra was a superstar.
Yeah.
So we were headliners on, you know, major festivals like Montreux and Arles and Antibes. You know, these were Ravenna. We played these festivals that were, you know, where he and Cecil Taylor were the major stars. So by that time, he had gone through, and this is one of the reasons I wrote the book also, because I think that John Swed's biography is really beautiful in terms of the earlier part of Sun Ra's life. But I think that he did not really deal with how the philosophy of Sun Ra allowed him to succeed. You understand what I'm saying? You know, that he used all that he studied to really be successful. Yeah, as a band leader, in building that institution. And by the time I joined the band, that success was evident. You know, so when it was just fantastic traveling with the band. You know, I mean, because we were like an army.
Yeah,
and that was one of the things that that I saw in the band when I was a teenager growing up on the Lower East Side. I said, these are some bad cats, man. You know, I mean, you know, they were dressed differently, they acted differently. You know what I'm saying? They were in a class by themselves. You know, as I say in the book, they were in their own class. Right? Nothing really, and still to today, you know, there's nothing like the Sun Ra Orkestra. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a unicum, yeah. And I mean, in the jazz opus, if you hear, it's like really a special world, actually. Yeah, it's
absolutely.
Really
and when you were around him, you were in his world. He was so powerful that, you know, you could forget about whatever else was going on. It was about being in Sun Ra's world. He was that powerful. And we are Buddhists. We practice Buddhism, and we think of him as a bodhisattva, who is an advanced being who comes to this planet to really help to enlighten the people on the planet. And he did that. He just radiated wisdom and energy and musicality, you know, beauty. And he would find beauty in almost anything. So being around him was just, you know, was a marvel. You know, you could walk down the street with him and he would see things that nobody else would see and point them out, you know, and you say, wow, you know, opening up your eyes and ears to possibilities, infinite possibilities. That's what he would always talk about, right?
Can I ask you just something like, I mean, already before joining Sun Ra, you were like leading your own groups and became already a part of the, you know, New York jazz scene. And what was your entry to that scene? Like, how did it start for you? I mean, who were the most important figures in your beginnings? Let's put it like that, like mid-60s or late 60s.
I would say that I was working at a daycare center. I talk about this in the book also. It was at 1310 Atlantic Avenue, in the same area, the Sistas places in Bedford-Stuyvesant. And as a young person, I was maybe about 21 years old when I started working there. And this is another thing in terms of understanding the, you know, my life. I was an educator then. You know, I was working with very young children then. I'm still working with very young children. It was a daycare center. And it happened to have been right around the corner from where the great bass player Reggie Workman lived. And Reggie Workman told me about a meeting of the Collective Black Artists that occurred in 1970. He and Jimmy Owens, and this is, you know, why these people play at Sistas Place, because I met them back then, right? You know, they were forming an organization, which is so important. It's what I tell the students at the new school when I teach them. I said, you know, artists have to form organizations. We have to form institutions that validate our art, because we're living in a place where people don't really validate art. You know, because they're about suppression of humanity. And if you want to validate humanity, you got to build institutions. That's what Monique and I do. We build institutions. We work together and that's why we have to work on ourselves, because if you don't work on yourself, you can't work to build anything else, right? You know, so building institutions is what Reggie and Jimmy did. They created an institution called the Collective Black Artists, and that's where I met Charles Brackeen from the Melodic Quartet. I met Blewett, who winds up being a very, very good friend of mine. Yeah. So and at that place, 1310 Atlantic Avenue, was where I formed my first band in 1972, which was called Abdullah. Yeah. And there was another organization that was called the New York Musicians Organization. Yeah. Which protested George Wein coming to New York in 1972 to do the Newport Jazz Festival. Yeah. And the New York Musicians Festival then became the impetus for the Loft movement. And the band, the Melodic Quartet, actually was one of the first bands to play at Sam River's Studio Rivby.
Yeah. Really? Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
That was in 1972. And that was 3 years before I started working with Sun Ra. So yes, the Loft movement was one of the things, along with Sun Ra, that allowed anybody, if I have any reputation that anybody knows about, is between the Loft movement and is in Sun Ra. Yeah. Those were the things that allowed me to be able to do what I do today.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask you about the Loft movement. When I talk to many musicians or had the privilege to play with some of the guys, who were a part of that, how was that? It sounds so incredible when people, talk about that, and you hear all these names who were joined for just jam sessions, and like, how did that work? I mean, when I just hear that, I have goosebumps. Like, but if you can just.
Well, it was also a sign of the times, right? We are talking about the second Reconstruction in America. We're living in the third Reconstruction in America now. The first one was after the Civil War, right? And of course, that was suppressed because the idea that African people in this country should be considered full-fledged human beings was not a reality that these people who were in positions of power wanted to embrace. Yeah. So we had to fight. African people have always had to fight in America. Yeah. And we fought, and that fight was suppressed because they had more power than us, but the fact of our needing to have equal opportunity and be recognized as full-fledged human beings, that could never be taken away because God is in everybody. Yeah. And you can never suppress a people to a point where they don't see their godliness, right? And so the second Reconstruction, which some people call the Civil Rights Movement, was really very much a part of the Loft movement of the 1960s and 1970s, right? You can look back to Bill Dixon and look at the October Revolution of 1964. Yeah, he was a person who understood the importance of that. And he organized musicians then, and they became the Jazz Composers Guild. Yeah. Out of that came then the need for musicians to organize. Yeah. And so in 1970s, you had the New York Musicians Festival. It was still about organizing and still on the same track of how do we move people forward? How do we move people forward through our art? Yeah. Yeah. And so that's what I come out of. I come out of that. Yeah. And yes, that was something that was happening before I joined the Sun Ra Band. Yeah. And that's the energy that I went into the Sun Ra Band with. So I was able to see him differently than maybe other people saw him. Yeah.
I did just want to mention that we had the opportunity earlier this year to perform at the space which used to be Rivby Studio.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Right.
It's now a theater space, but another group that we have worked with is Arts for Arts, who create the Vision Festival.
Yeah.
And they were able to secure a space in which they brought many of the musicians who had played at Studio Rivby in that loft. and it was a wonderful gathering of people, of musicians who played there, but also of younger musicians who play in that spirit, like Isaiah Collier, for example. And
Yeah,
I wanted to
I heard
mention,
him the other day. Yes.
yeah, and I wanted to mention that, you know, Sam and B Rivers are an inspiration to us,
Right.
in the sense that they created an organization that you know, sustained the music of that time. And Sam was very clear that B was totally an important part of the making of that space. In fact, the musicians were saying, as they related their time at Studio Riff B, that the person that you went to play a gig at Studio Riff B was B, right? That's how that worked. And there's also another person who, Rick Lopez, I think his name is, who has compiled this amazing kind of
sessionography,
you know, of everything Studio Rivby. I mean, it's like this big. I wish I had it so you could. We have it here, but you know, it's huge, and it just kind of records like everything that he could find about Studio Rivby. But I'm just saying, so you know that as an institution is still there, and there are many examples of unions like that, which were critical in terms of not just supporting individual musicians, but creating spaces that a lot of musicians from that era could partake in. So I just wanted to mention that as something that, you know, comes out of that loft period that Ahmed was discussing.
Yeah. And I think that Monique brings up a very important point in speaking of the feminine aspect, her being a feminist, and me not really understanding that as well. But until, you know, I met her and I got a fuller understanding of it. But then to understand how that works with the suppression of a culture. You see, when you suppress women, you suppress the spirit. And there's been an intent in America, and probably throughout a number of other countries, to suppress women, which means that you suppress the spirit of a people. Yeah. And so one of the things that we have to do in moving things forward is we have to raise up women. One of the things that Sam did, as Monique mentioned, he would talk, he called it Studio Riv B.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? It was Studio Riv B. It wasn't Sam Rivers' place. It was Studio Riv B. Yeah. And so if we want to really change the nature of things as we experience it, we've got to raise up the women in our culture. Yeah. We've got to raise up, because that's where the spirit is at. Everybody on this planet comes through women. Yeah. Sure. We all come through women. And so if you don't understand that, then you're missing a major part of reality. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I completely agree. We got a daughter with my wife like half a year ago. Yeah. And I was at the birth, and man, it was just like my perspective was like, damn, you know, it's just like it's completely changed. I was like, okay, like my hats, you know, like we are wussies in a you know, it's like nothing compared to, you know, birth, or it's just that's like right. Yeah, but you know, I understand what you're saying. It's just like this, it's so different. And yeah. The last one I've heard from you was a music of the spirit, speaking of the spirit and women. And you know, you and Monique cooperate on this one, among with other amazing musicians from Alex Harding and Bob Stewart. And I wanted to ask you if you're preparing something new, like an album-wise or project-wise, or have you been recording some new music? And how does this actually work with you? You know, kind of the question for both of you. You know, I've been a translator of actually African-American poetry into Slovenian. Like I've translated Audre Lorde and Nikki Giovanni and Michael S. Harper, and all these guys are influenced by jazz, obviously. Michael S. Harper, I mean, I love him. And how does this music influence you, Monique? And how Ahmed, she influences you also when you work together. I mean, it's kind of several questions, but you know.
Yes, it's a symbiotic relationship. But go, Monique, talk.
Well, how can I put this? So when I first began performing with the band, I was performing my own poetry, I believe, for the most part. But then we had a few other poets who joined the band, Atiba Kwabena Wilson, and most importantly, Luis Reyes Rivera. And so, you know, Luis is what we call an Afro-Rican. Is that what he called himself, Ahmed, an Afro-Rican?
Afro-Rican poet, yes.
Afro-Rican poet. So he's like a Puerto Rican, but centered in Africa in terms of African dispositions. And so Lewis is was a far more seasoned poet than I was. So he took the primary role in terms of like his poems, and then I would work alongside him in doing poems like For My People, which is Margaret Walker, you know, but I would continue to like, you know, try to insert my poetry in there. So I had like a long apprenticeship of performing poetry in the band, but I'm originally like a classical singer. I was trained classically, like Beethoven and stuff. So, you know, then I started to sing the lyrics of Sun Ra, which of course, you know, like you can't, it's like quite a lot freer than that.
Sure.
You know, we had some fun times. Like one time I was at the Detroit Music Festival, and like everybody else in the band is like going crazy, and Monique's just like right there on the note, on the beat, like singing the melody. You know, it was like funny. But you know, like so I said, so then Lewis passed away, and you know, one of my missions has become to keep the work of poets who are no longer on the planet, to keep their work live. So I started to perform one of Lewis's poems for Malcolm X. I performed like Ntozake Shanki's poems. You know, I continue to do For My People with Margaret Walker. Which, by the way, my one claim to fame, like Amiri Baraka came to one of our performances and he heard me do For My People, and he was like, and I was like, oh my God, Amiri said I'm right.
Okay, that's beautiful.
So you know what I'm saying? You know, I too can be a little, you know, like fan, whatever. But yeah, so then, you know, in the end, the other way that Ahmed has influenced me is just to be that close to the creative process, to see how he puts together the music in terms of the band, and his expectations. Like often he would put me in situations where I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but he would expect that I could do it, so I did it. So you know, all of that has been very important for me creatively. And then finally I went and did my MFA. So now I feel like I can officially call myself a poet because I'm more seasoned in my craft, because before I was doing it, but I wasn't like, you know, so now I so now I call myself a proper poet, as it were. But we started off doing like small bands, right? Ahmedian, like 2 or 3 people, 3, 4 people going out to do stuff. And then we built up to, you know, like where we have like 10 people in the band. And I'm the only woman on the bandstand in all cases. So I don't know what to say about that, but that is
the project Diaspora meets AfroHORN, which I think you're referring to, is Melchizedek Music Productions' first foray into actually doing a recording. We had never done a recording before, and the reason that the name is so long, Diaspora meets AfroHORN, jazz and music of the spirit, out of Sistas place, is because it came from some people who were fans of ours, who had this really unique studio that is in the heart of Bedford-Stuyvesant on Fulton Street. And they would come to our concerts. I would book myself, I would book the band there, like 2 times a year in October and April. And they would hear the concert and say, "Oh, Ahmed, you got to record, you got to record." And, I hadn't really recorded anything in years.
Mhm.
So, but they had this perfect studio for us to record at, and so we decided to do that, and then it's also mystical because Francisco Mora Catlett, who I worked with when I first came into the Sun Ra band, we kind of re-met over the last few years, and I was doing things with his band AfroHORN, and he would come and do things at Sistas' place, and so I suggested to him that we do something together. So Melchizedek Music Productions produced this recording, and 3 years ago, before the pandemic hit, and we had all these recordings with no place to play and nothing to do with them. So but things happen. Things happen, and they happen because they're supposed to happen. Because we did want to document this idea of jazz and music of the spirit, and just like the publishing of the book documents jazz and music of the spirit. Yeah, we have the principles, we have the progenitors, we all have all that documented in the book, and that is something that comes from that 25 years of working out of Sistas' place and the 22 years of working with Sun Ra. Yeah, so it's really another perspective into the life that we have led over the course of our 31 years together. Yeah.
Did you mention that at the beginning the progenitors were all male?
Well, that you see, this is why Monique is my wife, because because you can't have music of the spirit with just males, right? That's patriarchy, right? So she did understand that the first people we had John Coltrane, Sun Ra, and Duke Ellington, and she said, "What? That's not going to work." Right, and so then we found Betty Carter, Nina Simone, right? And Mary Lou Williams. And so we started with 6, and now we have 9. We added Aminata Moseka when she left the planet. We added Jackie McLean when he left the planet, and this most recently we added Yusuf Lateef. So 9 is actually the number of spirit. You see, 9 is a number that reproduces itself. So and jazz is under the number 9. Yeah, Sun Ra hit me to that, which is why he didn't have a problem with the word jazz, because he was looking, metaphysically. People were looking and say, "Oh, that name is, it's like the word Negro." Not quite. It's not quite like Negro, because if you take the letters of jazz and you deal with numerology, you deal with, meta science, yeah, you will understand that J is the 10th letter of the alphabet, and A is the first letter of the alphabet. You add 10 and 1 and you get 11. And then the Z's are 26. 26 plus 26 adds to 52. And you add 11 and 52 and you get 63. And you add 6 and 3 and you get 9. You see, 9 is a number that always reproduces itself. So it's a spiritual number. Yeah. That's why you have to include the women, because women reproduce, right? You see what I'm saying? So we are able to, because of the different ways that we come at things, we're able to do something that we feel is significantly different and important to humanity.
Yeah, beautifully put. Ahmed, I just wanted to ask you one thing. How did you meet David as Ware, and how was it? He's for me one of the probably most underrated players in the history of the music. But how was your relationship with him, and your story with him, actually?
It actually comes through my doing recording for Silk Heart Records, and just like Melchizedek was given to me, the name Solomonic
Mhm.
was given to me. There was a woman who is a woman who's able to see the future. I call her a seeress, and she was able to see things in my life. When I went to her for some advice,
It's 5 o'clock.
she was able to tell me about things that she saw about me. And she said that one of the things was the name Solomon. Yeah, Solomon, look at you, right?
Exactly.
Solomon was vibrating in my life. And here you are, the first person who does the interview of our book, right? She said the name Solomon was vibrating in my life and that I needed to use that and I would know when to use it. And Charles Moffett is a person who I met just before that it came to me that I should use that name at that particular time. See, we're talking about the omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent reality. You know, there is no separation in time and space and people, right? You know, when you understand the spiritual level of this that we're living in. Yeah. So I had done a recording for Silkart Records, which comes out of Sweden, Lars Gustafsson and Keith Knox. They were the people who were involved in that. And they asked me to come and do a recording for them, actually based on Lars Gustafsson hearing me with the melodic quartet.
Okay.
He might have been one of 10 people in the audience when we were performing in the lofts. In I don't know where it was, whether it was Studio Ribby or wherever it was, but he had heard me, you know, in the 1970s, about 1986, 87, 86, 87, something like that. 87, I'm sure it was, yep. He asked me to come to Dallas, Texas to work with doing a recording with Charles Brackeen, but it wasn't a melodic quartet. Yeah. He asked me to do a recording on my own. And Charles Brackeen became my side man, right? And he gave me Malachi Favors and Alvin Fielder to do the recording with, right?
Yeah, beautiful.
And it wound up being the only quartet situation that Charles Brackeen and I were involved with. But after that, he gave me the wherewithal to do a recording, another recording with the people I wanted to do a recording with. I wanted to do a recording with Charles Moffett. Yeah. I wanted to do a recording with Fred Hopkins. I wanted to do a recording with Carlos Ward. Yeah. And those are the people I submitted. Yeah. Now, turns out that Carlos Ward had a gig with Don Cherry in the Caribbean, but I had already submitted his name to the Silkart people. So they had approved me using Carlos Ward. So at the time, I was living right around the corner from David S. Ware. Yeah. I lived on 5th Street with Mickey Davidson, who Monique mentioned earlier, and David lived on 7th Street. And we actually were driving yellow cabs together. I would drive it in the evening and he would drive it in the daytime, and we shared this cab together. Both musicians. He worked with Cecil Taylor. I worked with Sun Ra. We knew each other from that, but we were also, you know, struggling and trying to deal with the reality of our existence. So because we had a really close relationship doing what we did, I submitted his name. They loved David S. Ware. In fact, from the time we did the Solomonic, David S. Ware became the, you know, the poster boy for Silkart Records. He did about 3 or 4 recordings with Silkart, and he went to DIW. He went to, you know, did all kinds of recordings after that. Before then, you know, people didn't even know who David S. Ware was.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know, so it was an amazing thing. Yeah. And they dropped me because I brought in a guitar. They didn't like the guitar, right? I brought in Masuja, who was like a brilliant artist, right? You know, so like that. But that's how I met David S. Ware. We lived and we worked around the corner from each other. And the reason I brought in the guitar was his sound is so huge, right?
Yeah.
His sound was so huge, I had to bring in the guitar to try to balance out the sound. Yeah. And but the Silk Card people didn't like it. You know, I thought it was one of my best recordings.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
and we used Marion Brown's painting on the cover of it, you know, to boot. And I got Robert Palmer to do the liner notes for it. So I thought it was a fantastic opportunity, you know. But you know, things happen. You know, the thing is that in this music of the spirit, you can't hold on to anything. You know, you gotta, you know, you do what you do, and then you give it over to the creator, and the creator shows you the next thing that you're supposed to do. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Guys, before I ask you, like either you, Monique, or Ahmed, to read one part of the book that I really like, I wanted to ask you, when Sun Ra passed away, you know, and the band still continued afterwards, you know, under Marshall and John Gilmer, like how was that for you guys? Like, I mean, you were already together then, like how did you experience that moment when that happened?
It was very, very difficult. Very difficult. We you know, somebody would always tell us that you got to pay your dues, right? In this music, you got to pay your dues. And that was dues paying time. Yeah. Because I had invested a lot. Sun Ra was really working in the last part of his life, was working at the highest level he could work at. You know, that's when I met Monique, right? You know, and after that, I mean, with John Gilmore, the band barely worked. We worked maybe once a month, maybe every 2 months. You know, it was falling apart. It was falling apart. And that's when we decided that we would deal with the Melchizedek Music Productions to do that, to bring this angelic spirit back into the band. Yeah. And we started producing concerts on the Lower East Side, just as Sun Ra developed his ability in 1966 by working at Slugs. We said, okay, we knew a fellow named Ed Montgomery who had a place called Context, and we created a series of concerts there. And all of a sudden, right, it was like an angelic spirit had taken over. You know, people started coming out. They really started seeing that the Sun Ra band could function without Sun Ra, which was not evident under John Gilmore. It became evident under Marshall Allen. Yeah. And as it, I mean, last year they were nominated for a Grammy, you know, but like all things, I'm saying it was time for us to leave that. We did that for 2 years at least, you know, from 95 to 97. And then we moved on from there. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask you to read a passage?
Sure, but do I have the book? You know the page number?
Yeah, it's like this last part for like I think it's 517. Like
but I don't have it to hand.
Oh, it's no worries. I just thought if you wanted to read something would be cool. Otherwise, it's not a problem. So
I wouldn't mind, but I don't have, you know, the version that you have.
Oh shit! Yeah. Okay.
Like we don't have that version. We have that online, so we would have to go online to find it.
Oh, no worries, guys. It's cool. No, but it's just like you know, it's such a beautiful part. Like how you end the book. This like 2 paragraphs. Like you know, it's really nicely written about the spirit and how it still moves on. That's what I wanted to,
oh, okay.
Is it the one that's on? It's on the website, baby.
Oh shit! I don't know. About that.
Can you share your screen and we could just read it?
If you share your screen, we can read it. Yeah.
If you have it, you could just read it from there.
Just a second. Let me see. Log in. But otherwise, it's not a problem. Let me see. Sorry, it takes time.
No, we're fine.
I'll log back in. Come on.
I see a Sweet Basil T-shirt behind you.
Yeah, Man, sure.
Have you been there?
Sure. I was like in 1997.
Wow.
Wow, that's a long time ago. Wow. Yeah, we played there, right,
Really?
baby? We played
Well, we played Sweet. It was called Sweet Rhythm then,
Rhythms
Yeah.
then.
and that's
Exactly.
under James Brown, who took it over from the people who had it, Mel and Phyllis.
Yeah.
They were the ones who had Sweet Basil. Then James Brown took it. And interestingly enough, James Brown's son is on the board of directors of Blank Forms, who's publishing the book.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Okay.
And we did a reading of the book at his place a few months ago, right?
Yeah.
Just
Can I just mention, Samo, while you're finding it, that Ahmed mentioned Charles Moffett, and Charles Moffett was also a very big influence on us, not only musically, but also in terms of our union, because he paradoxically is married to Shirley Moffett, who's born like 2 days after me. She's an Aries too. And they raised a whole family of musicians, Annette and Cody and
Daryl.
Charles, and they had a family band, and Charles was always very kind to me. Like he would be like, roses are red, violets are blue. He would like show me the beat. Yeah, I just wanted to mention Charles and Shirley because they were a model, I think, Ahmedian, you said, also as you look to build an institution with a partner, right?
Yes, absolutely. And there was 12 years difference in them as well. Charles was 12 years older than Shirley, as I'm 12 years older than Monique. There are all kinds of relationships that we saw, but Charles, I always think of Charles as my third mentor. Yeah, the first one was Cal Massey, the second one was Sun Ra, and Charles was my third. And the Music of the Spirit 3 is a powerful number. You got anything that's of spiritual nature comes in threes. Yeah. So Charles was the person who told me basically that I was ready to go out on my own and do what I needed to do because the time of being mentored was at an end, and now I needed to teach some other folks, to pass this information on that I'd gotten from these great people, man, who had the good fortune of being in my life.
Yeah, it's beautiful that this book is coming out. Like I said, because it's so much history in there.
Yes,
it's just like incredible. I love that. Like I don't know if you can see this now.
May 22nd, I went to hear and see Marshall and the Sun Ra Orkestra perform at the Vision Festival in New York. I don't know if the events had affected them as they did me. By then, I'd become the musical director of Sistas plays, booking as many adventurous musicians as I could back into the community from which they had rooted and sprung. Now, there was no real contact between the orchestra and me, but it was joyful to hear Sun Ra's music mixed in with Marshall's. The music sounded as if they had been jolted into a new awareness. Perhaps it was necessary for them to have united against me, in order to do what they had to do. When they saw me in the audience, they gave me mixed reviews. I was treated warmly by some and given the cold shoulder by others. Marshall, however, made a point of acknowledging my presence by playing some fierce alto saxophone as he walked around the room and came right past me. Whether or not the others wanted to understand it, we were all children of the sun. And with all the turmoil behind us, there now existed two different ensembles honoring the legacy of Sun Ra.
Yeah, I love that. It's so nicely. I mean, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh,
And you know, there's a fellow who has a picture, and it's not in the book actually, but he has a picture of Marshall doing exactly that, playing in front of it, right? It's a great picture, but they said it wouldn't print well enough to be in the book because they're very, very, very particular about the photos. We have some really great photos in the of the 78 that were there in the book. You know, I think there's enough for us to do a whole piece just of the artwork and photo. You know, yeah.
Very quickly, I just saw Ahmed Abdullah with Luis Reyes Rivera, and even though I mentioned Luis, we didn't mention so much about his role in terms of working with you on the initial, draft of the book, and also once again our relationship with Luis and Barbara.
Right.
Barbara Reyes Rivera is the daughter of John Oliver Killens, who's a major writer in terms of the African American tradition here. So I just wanted to mention that because I think that's another significant relationship that we have or have had with Luis and Barbara. Yeah.
And we still have with Barbara Killens Rivera. John Oliver Killens, if you don't know, you should research him. He was a brilliant writer. He one of his great books is called Young Blood. But he also wrote a book on Pushkin that Luis actually edited. The Black Russian poet. Luis Reyes Rivera was he was sent to me by Amiri Baraka. Yeah, I originally thought that Amiri Baraka would be the person that I would choose to help me with this with the memoir, and he gave me a couple of names. One of them was Luis, and the good fortune that we had was that Monique and I, the day after we got married, April 18th, 1992, we saw Luis reading at a poetry event for a woman named Fatisha, who was a great poet also, who was hooked up with Arthur Blight. We mentioned Arthur Blight earlier. Okay. And we went to this event and we heard Luis. And so when Amir Baraka said Luis's name, because I couldn't forget him, he's a little guy who walks with a cane. And, you know, when he's reading, he like lays on his cane and he was, you know, like laying these lines out. He had the poem that he read, I'll never forget it, was called Cuba. And it's one of his epic poems. Yeah. And he read this poem, man. And when Amiri Baraka said Luis Reyes Rivera, I said, that's it. You know, and we became really close friends from then on. And in fact, Luis is the person that brought me to Sistas' place, because we were on this memoir sitting out in front of Sistas' place. Yeah. And Viola Plummer, who was the person who founded Sistas' place, heard me, because I also would wind up playing with Luis. He had an event that he called Jazzoetry that would happen on the first and third Sundays of every month. And in relationship to him working with me with the memoir, I worked with him with my trumpet, and we would do these things. He would do Jazzoetry, right? And Viola Plummer heard me playing one Sunday, and she said, you know, Carlos Garnett was the music director at Sistas' Place up in you know, until 6 months before then. And she said that they needed a music director, and would I be that person? That was in 1998, man. And I stayed there for 25 years. 25 years as a result of Luis, right? Yeah. You know, so like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, guys, you know, like I said, it's a fantastic book, and like it's I need a hard copy when it's available. Like I really have to get it. But
yeah,
you know, thanks for sharing some of these thoughts. I really appreciate it today. Like it's You know, I'm a musician myself and an improviser and composer, but I just love reading this stuff. It's just,
Yes.
it's before my time, you know, and I just love this music and the culture so much. And it's just like to read, I feel like a small kid then in a sandbox. And like, man, you know, it's like really, it's like so exciting always. So, you know, it's, thanks for sharing.
I think that when you're true to the music, that's what it does to you, man. I mean, you just want more and more of it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I'll just, you know, all these names and dates you see, like, man, you know, like 1971. I'm like, man, gee, you know, it's so incredible to read all this stuff. So really cool. I'm really happy you did it.
When is your arrival day? What month and day did you come on the planet?
Oh, 9th of October, 78.
The 9th, okay, yeah, you right
9.
around Jerry Baraka. Yeah, and a 9 too, yes, right. Yeah. 9, in fact, wow.
Yeah, so, but, you know, so, but like I said, thanks so much for sharing this stuff and sharing the book also before it came out soon, and really appreciate it.
Thank you, man, thank you, yeah. Right.
And I think